When the rancher looked twice. A Wild West tale of secrets, stares, and sudden love. The Man on Willow Ridge. Ethan Calloway had lived alone on Willow Ridge for nearly 10 years. Folks in Dry Creek County whispered about him. Some said he was a genius with horses, others that he could shoot a rattler off a fence post at 70 paces without flinching. But everyone agreed on one thing: Ethan didn't talk much. His ranch lay at the edge of the high plains, where the grass twisted golden in summer and the wind hit like a blade in winter. He tended his herd from dawn to dusk, ate his meals at the table for one, and went to bed early. In a town full of talkers and fiddlers, Ethan was silence incarnate. When a stranger passed through town and tried to ask about him, old bartender Murphy just grunted, "He's a man who keeps to himself. Best let it be." And so, no one ever thought much about Ethan, until the day he looked twice. The stranger at the corral. It was mid-September when she arrived. Ethan was mending a split rail near the corral when he heard hoofbeats against the loose stones of the ranch drive. He glanced up out of habit, but stopped. A rider was approaching. A woman, dressed in a long, dust-smudged coat, her bay mare lumbering like it had ridden 5 days straight. Ethan's eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but in sheer disbelief. She wasn't like the traveling performers who passed through Dry Creek, nor like the schoolmarms or mail-order brides who sometimes intended to settle down in the frontier. There was a fierceness about her, but also something broken. When she caught sight of Ethan, she pulled her mare to a stop halfway down the drive. "I need water," she said, voice rough from dust and wind. No grace, no pleasantries, just a woman too worn out to bother with manners. Ethan didn't speak, he just stood there and stared, but something in his gaze made her uneasy, not angry, not frightened, but unsettled, like she was seeing something she wasn't ready for. "You got water," she repeated. A moment passed, then Ethan turned, walked toward the barn, and gestured with his chin. A hard past and a quiet ranch. She watched in silence as he walked away, oddly calm, almost indifferent. His back was straight, his gait confident. Despite the solitude, there was something about him that spoke of strength. She followed him. Ethan filled a battered tin canteen at the trough and handed it over without a word. She drank deeply, too deeply, like she had gone weeks without water. When she was done, she extended the canteen for a refill. Ethan hesitated, then refilled it. "Thanks," she muttered, her eyes flicking toward the distant hills. "Name's Clara Beaumont." Ethan nodded once, without turning. "What's your name?" she asked. "Ethan." That was all she got. Clara's story unraveled as the sun climbed. She'd been headed to Santa Rosa, rumors of work, of a fresh start, when she and her mare were caught in a dust storm. She lost her supplies, her map, and, she didn't say this part right away, nearly lost her hope. Ethan listened without comment. When she finished, he offered her a place to rest. No words, just a nod toward the old guest shack by the barn. Clara didn't hesitate. Nights of whiskey and secrets. That evening, Murphy, the bartender from Dry Creek, rode out to see Ethan. "Don't tell me you brought trouble home," Murphy said before he even dismounted. Ethan didn't laugh. He just waved Murphy inside the barn. Clara was there, fixing herself a cup of coffee and staring out at the red horizon. Murphy looked her over, not impolitely, but with that rough Western curiosity. "You lost?" Murphy finally asked. "Just passing through," she replied, keeping her eyes steady. "Ethan's a good man to know," Murphy said, pouring 2 fingers of whiskey into a chipped tin cup. "But he don't take kindly to strangers at first." Clara smiled wryly. "I'm not easy to unsettle." Murphy chuckled, clapped Ethan on the shoulder, and rode back to town. Ethan watched the dust settle behind him. Then he sat beside Clara in the barn's fading light. For the first time since she arrived, they talked. Not much, but enough. About the wind, about the cattle, about how the world out there seemed to change every day. But Clara's eyes betrayed a deeper story, one she didn't speak right away. A visitor in the night. Clara woke Ethan before dawn. There was movement near the corral, something more than an animal. Ethan grabbed his rifle, and Clara followed silently, her hand near the lantern. In the dim light, they saw a man on horseback, a stranger with sunburned skin and eyes like chipped flint. "Ethan Calloway," the rider called. Ethan didn't answer. "You helped my sister once," the stranger said, spitting dust. "Now I need to return the favor." Clara's eyes snapped to Ethan. "Who is he?" she whispered. Ethan didn't say a word. But something in his posture changed, like a ripple in still water. The stranger introduced himself as Josiah Black, a bounty hunter who tracked trouble like coyotes track blood. He claimed someone was after Clara, someone who thought she had something that belonged to him. Clara's eyes widened, then narrowed. "Why should I trust him?" she asked Ethan. Still no answer. But the sun was rising now, and shadows were shrinking. And in Ethan's silence, Clara felt seen. The truth beneath dust. That night, by the fire outside the ranch house, Clara told Ethan her real story. Not the stranger parts, those were real, but the reason she was running. She wasn't just seeking work. She was seeking freedom from a past that smelled of betrayal, fear, and a life that nearly broke her. Ethan listened, not with pity, but with that same stillness that made people think he didn't care. But he did care, because unlike the people who judged her by her clothes or her tired eyes, Ethan saw her exactly as she was. A survivor. When she finished, there was a long, quiet moment. The fire crackled, the stars blinked in the vast sky, and Ethan said, one word: stay. Storm on the horizon. The next morning, Josiah was gone, vanished into the first wash of sunlight. Clara wondered if he was friend or threat. Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he saddled a horse and rode with her toward Dry Creek to gather supplies. The wind was fierce that day, dragging dust like it had something to prove. At the trading post, a group of men eyed Clara suspiciously. "You're that woman passing through," one said, spitting in the dirt. "Heard your trouble." Clara didn't flinch, but Ethan stepped forward. "Back off," he said, voice low and steady. The men blinked at him, at his calm, at his confidence. Then they backed down. Later that evening, Clara asked, "Why did you do that?" Ethan looked at the red earth, then up at the sky. "Because trouble doesn't get to decide who stands alone," he said. Clara realized, then, that this man's silence wasn't emptiness, it was depth. Between two fires, winter came early that year. Snow dusted the ridge, and the wind carried sharper edges than before. Josiah returned, but this time, he wasn't alone. A group of armed men trailed behind him. Clara stood in the doorway of the ranch house, her breath fogging in the cold. "You can come with us," Josiah said. "People like you, they belong with us." Clara didn't flinch, but Ethan stepped beside her. "No," he said simply. The air was heavy with tension, like the world held its breath. Josiah raised his rifle. Ethan moved first. The next moments were a blur of thunder and snow and the crack of gunfire. When it was over, Josiah lay wounded, not dead, but close. Clara ran to Ethan. His coat was torn, his face pale, but his eyes were steady. "You all right?" she asked. He nodded, but Clara could see it in his eyes. He had stood in darkness for so long, it took something like this to bring him fully into the light. The rancher and the woman who stayed. Spring arrived slowly. The snow melted. The grass turned green again. And Clara remained on Willow Ridge, not as a passing stranger, not as a weary traveler, but as someone who belonged there. Ethan taught her how to ride the range. She learned to rope calves, mend fences, and read the skies for storms. In return, Clara brought laughter into the silent ranch house. She taught Ethan how to speak without thinking first, something he never knew he needed. Their days were long, their work hard, but the nights were full of stories told beside the fire, when the wind softened and the stars shone like silver promises. And then, one evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the hills gold, Clara asked Ethan a question she'd never thought to ask before. "Why did you stare at me like that when I arrived?" Ethan paused. Then he smiled, a slow, rare thing that reached his eyes. "Because I'd seen a lot of things in my life," he said, "but I'd never seen you." Clara laughed, a warm, easy sound. And beneath that wide western sky, where the plains stretched out forever, Ethan took a step he'd never taken before. He spoke. "I'd like you to stay, forever." Clara's eyes glistened, not with fear, not with uncertainty, but with hope. New beginning on Willow Ridge. That summer, the ranch flourished like it hadn't in years. Neighbors came by more often, not out of curiosity, but out of friendship. Dry Creek County found itself welcomed into their lives, not as intruders, but as part of something new and strong. Clara and Ethan worked side by side, their laughter carrying on the wind like a song. And every evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the sky blazed with orange and purple hues, Ethan would walk out to the fence, stand beside Clara, and look at her with that same steady gaze he had on her first day. Only now, it wasn't silence. It was love. Subscribe for more videos.